in the first 48 to 72 hours right now, we're actually I'd say in the last year, seeing between 2,000 and 3,000 resumes in 72 hours. And there's usually one recruiter on the roll.
Welcome to the Summoning Hour, the podcast about everything game development. I'm Joe Belousek, your host. A game development role can receive thousands of applications in a matter of days, while the recruiter on the other side may be balancing many open roles, hiring teams, interviews, and decisions they do not control. That does not make silence or a confusing process less frustrating, but it does mean hiring looks very different from the inside. Today, I'm joined by Christeen Mackey, a game industry talent acquisition leader with nearly 15 years of experience recruiting and leading recruiting teams. We talk about applicant tracking systems, why resumes and job descriptions can function as risk mitigation documents, how to prepare stronger interview stories, what AI can and cannot add to an application, and where recruiting still needs to become more transparent and human. One quick note is that there is a technical hiccup with this episode's audio. Bear with me, it's just this one. I've got it figured out now, so next episode will sound better. But for now, the show must go on, so let's get into it. Hey everybody, today we are starting with a close friend of mine and someone I've worked with for a number of years, both at Wargaming Seattle and at Blizzard. And it's not usually a partnership you hear too much about within the game development studios, but myself as a producer and our guest as a recruiter has a tremendous amount of experience, and we got to work very closely together, and the two disciplines intertwine quite a lot and quite often. So let's dive into what a recruiter is, who they are, what we get wrong about recruiting just from looking from the outside. As often, recruiters are often the most visible person in the hiring process, and fairly or not, that means they absorb a lot of the frustrations when applications disappear, interviews stall, or a rejection arrives without much explanation. Today, I am joined by Christeen Mackey, a senior talent partner with nearly 15 years of experience in the games industry. And we're pulling back the curtain at least a little bit on what recruiters actually do, what may be happening behind the scenes, and what candidates can control, and where recruiting itself still needs to improve. So, hi, Christeen.
Hello. How's it going?
Oh, just another day, another podcast, another great conversation with friends or new friends. So I'm excited to get another conversation out there. And right now, we both know what the industry is like. So recruiting is
Yeah.
a hot topic, a hot connection to have. And I know you and I have spoken candidly about both of our disciplines. So I'm really excited your perspective on camera and on film so that others can really weigh in what they know versus what's going on from your perspective. So I'm really excited for the value I know you'll have, just because you'll speak directly, candidly, and honestly, and you know your shit. So I'm excited.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, if anyone doesn't know me, welcome to me. I'm really blunt. I'm kind of known in the industry for being a bullshit caller, which works well for me in some areas and in other areas not so much. But yeah, just to be really clear, we're not going to be talking about specific companies, but really just as a games recruiter in general. Whether it's advice I give or if I talk about processes, it's 15 years amalgamated across multiple companies, and not just my own stories, but from what other recruiters have shared with me as well. So we're not talking about specifics in particular to any company that we're both aligned with or not. But just to throw that out there, these are my opinions, they are my own, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I'm really excited to get into it because to your point, the industry has completely changed, by the way. It has shifted. And in the 15 years that I've been in recruiting and leading recruiting teams, not just in recruiting, but actually leading teams and coming up with corporate strategies for those teams, we have never seen a time like this. And so everything I say is also with the caveat of who knows, right? We're all trying to figure out a lot of these pieces together. We are not a part of these decisions being made, but we're all reacting to them as best as we can and trying to support people and uplift each other and, people that are really hurting right now. We've just never seen anything like this, at least in my tenure, I've never seen anything like this. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at the games industry as a whole, you have to go back to the 80s to see this kind of massive churn on how the industry survives is going to look very different than it was. And the accountability and the running of it is going to be a big shift. And so I think you're absolutely right. We don't know where we're going and we don't know what this is
Yeah.
going to look like. It
Yeah.
won't be the same. And it's very much that mentality of when we went into quarantine years ago, it was like, hey, this is a big shift. We'll never go back to the way it was. Well, some
Yes.
things go back, but your mindset, the perspective, and looking at things, you go, I'm not going back to that, or I'm not going back to that kind of behavior because you've just
Hmm.
fundamentally changed. And that's where we're at in the industry perspective. We have fundamentally changed. So, starting
Hmm.
with the recruiter and getting to know how that's working right now, I think is really important so that people know how to present themselves in a way that is
Yes.
more modern and up to date and understand what that process is going to look like. So here's the opening salvo for you, Christine. When candidates picture the recruiter, what do they usually misunderstand about the person and the job?
Um, a lot. I think a lot. I think there's a lot of discrepancy between what people think our job was and what it is now. I think people assume we have actually a lot more time than we have. And so I'd really love to. I'm going to post some questions back to you and see if we can look at some assumptions maybe that are being made, or at least kind of peel back the curtain a little bit on what the current status is for a lot of recruiters. First of all, I was actually part of a big layoff. And at that time, I was doing market analysis, and over 250,000 recruiters were laid off in the same year that I was laid off. So when we had this discrepancy of game developers, not discrepancy, when we had this, we've just had layoff after layoff. We've had organizational changes and people making decisions and yada, yada. That's how we got here. In the midst of, we're talking tens of thousands of game developers, we also had a huge amount of recruiters across multiple industries all let go at the same time because of the assumption that AI could do a lot of analysis for a human being, and we're finding out that's actually not the case. Nor is it legal in most cases. You cannot have AI making hiring decisions actually for you. So it should still be a human being. One of the biggest fundamental changes is that we flipped from a candidate market, so a job seeking market, into an employer market, meaning that 10 years ago, when I was looking for a producer, almost everybody that's qualified was pretty much working. And I would need to go and kind of ask people, do you want to leave your company? Are you interested in our company? We're looking at talent attraction, and we're looking at employer branding, and we're really trying to entice people to apply to a company.
Right.
So I would post a job at that time at some of the companies we worked at, and like maybe over the course of a week, I'd get 100, maybe 150 applications, of which maybe 50% are like somewhat relevant and about 10% are actually relevant, right? To the role, to the
Yeah.
exact role I'm looking for, relocation, lives in the area we need, et cetera, already, if we can't do relo on visa. So I have a question for you, knowing that, 10 years, well, even 7 years ago, 5 years ago, if I had like 150, 120 people applying in about a week, how many people do you think are applying to a current role, like mid-level to senior role right now? And let's talk about like in the first 72 hours, how many people are you betting are applying to a role?
See, mid-level. I think for companies that are like your triple A big names, I think you get well over 500 in the first 72 hours. For some of the lower, lesser known smaller studios, I think you'll probably still get a couple hundred. By the end of the week, I bet, depending on the position, like a mid-level producer, I bet you probably see over 1,000.
Hmm. Yeah, you're pretty close ish. In the first 48 to 72 hours right now, um, we're actually like, I'd say in the last year, seeing between 2 and 3,000 resumes in 72 hours. And there's usually
Wow.
one recruiter on the roll.
Yep.
And so, yeah, like it is absolutely overwhelming, right? Um and so what is really difficult is we know people that are applicable to the role that have all the qualifications are there
Yeah.
without using AI, right? Human first approach. If I'm a human being looking at a resume, even if it's a 10 or 15-second scan, and we can probably reverse engineer this. I know I have it in my notes somewhere. And I want to say the math is probably completely wrong, but I think it was like if I take 10 to 15 seconds for 1,500 resumes or it was 1,000 resumes, it was like 9.5 hours straight of just doing that. And that's one role. An average recruiter is carrying like 15 and upwards of 25 recs, depending on high volume or low. So there's literally not enough hours in the day, right? And so that is where, and we can get into this later. I know the job hunt is exhausting, right? It is
Yeah.
I swear it feels like 4 jobs just trying to find a job and apply. But, and I know I will get hate for this, I'm pretty sure. It is why it is so integral to understand how AI and applicant tracking systems work and how to talk about your experience on a resume appropriately. So hopefully we'll get into that a little bit later or on another podcast, outside of the kind of looking at the studio view, but it is absolutely integral right now to understand. And like, if you don't know anything about agentic AI, get into it. I know AI is a hot topic, but using agentic AI to help your job search and fuel your job search is going to be a huge key in keeping yourself organized and feeling like you have a digital assistant for yourself. So super important random thought for later on. Um, so out of those thousands, how many people do you think I'm able to facilitate recruiting screens with out of like 3,000 people that apply, let's say in the first week?
And
Yeah, it's usually like 4 to 20, depending on my how many hours I can put towards it outside of meetings and hiring manager syncs and strategy calls and employer branding meetings and all of the other pieces that we do.
yeah.
Job description writing, looking through applicant tracking systems, sorting through and finding more candidates and talent. Um, so yeah, that's
How
per position with one headcount.
how important
Hmm?
is it then to be in that first 100? So like LinkedIn will show you 100 people have clicked apply. Now that doesn't mean that you've gotten 100 applications. But if
Mm-hmm.
we were just to isolate LinkedIn and be like, no other applications are coming in from any other sources, but 100 people apply, is it still worth a person's time to send in an application? Because if we're only looking
Absolutely.
20, absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Because in my opinion, quality recruiters understand their tools and they will be able to find people who apply after that first 24 to 72 hour period. And to be honest, the hiring timelines are quite a bit more elongated, I think, right now, at least just people really having to sort through a lot of applications. And so, yeah, I would like to say that every recruiter looks at every single application themselves and that there's a human being on it. But with that kind of workload, it is really, really difficult. And so, the best advocacy you can have for yourself isn't necessarily looking at, oh, well, I'm not in the first 100, people that apply. They're not going to look at me. It's the quality of the resume. It is how you speak about what you did, not just telling me what you did. Like, for instance, like I know what a producer is, but if you're not telling me what you impacted and how you did it and the like what you loved about it, really, what did you get passionate about? Show me some KPIs and metrics that you and I can speak about, but also make sure that you can speak about them. If you say, I increased XYZ by 35% or reduced XYZ friction by 20%, be prepared for questions about that. And like really get comfortable with interviewing, which again might be another podcast that we get into at some point, is like proper interviewing and how to structure your interview. Regardless of how a recruiter presents a question, how do you answer it intelligently and thoughtfully and expressing what's important to you out of each question and making sure that it's a quality response, which is not really taught very well by both post-secondary education. And usually when we're job hunting is the time it comes up. we haven't been taught really how to interview well as well. So that's kind of another portion of it.
I mean,
We we,
the
we
other
have like a
side is
10-part
that
series already.
don't. Yeah, right. I mean, hey, if we have you come back monthly for recruiting with Christine sections and
Yeah,
segments,
it'd be great.
happily have that.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, let's just get into it. Let's talk about ATS and what people need to be doing to better understand the environment that they're in and what they need to be doing to be credible applicants. I have no doubt that they have valid experience, but talking about it, interviewing well, and understanding the ecosystem that the team is operating in and the recruiter is operating in has to be some amount of that knowledge to help navigate or help even just use the right terms, use the right wording, make the right approach to that human that's on the other side because your recruiter is the only contact that you have.
Hmm. You might have some networking that you've done too. Like you might have other friends or referral, right? You might come in through referral, which I think is pretty strong right now too, especially for mid-level and above. I think it's a little harder for entry level, but they can still be there. So let's talk about applicant tracking systems. So in case just maybe some people don't know what that is or like the evil ATS. So applicant tracking systems are actually systems that properly protect data and handle all of the data consent that is a part of our agreement with society in terms of personal information and how we gather it, how we store it, where it's stored. It also will help us with like organizing interviews. It will keep applicants on file. By the way, just as a side note, you can actually request any company delete all of your data, and they have to do that. So just keeping in mind if you don't want your data floating out there after somebody has declined you, if you do want to pull your application out, you can absolutely do that. And every company should have an answer for that for you. So, but yeah, it's basically a place where people apply on a link and that link goes into our system and then we can look at every application regardless of the source it's coming in from. More powerful ones will have good filtering tools and those filters will literally be like the technological terms that are posted on the job description. We don't really use anything that stack ranks, by the way, at all, in most of the systems that I've been in, which I think is like I've heard of some companies that have access to like stack ranking, like how much does this person match? But most of the other systems, like any of the systems I've used, I have to like literally go through. There's no stack ranking available according to match, for instance. So really, it's just a repository, and it's my job to go through and really try to search the most effective ways that I can. So an example might be maybe a role cannot offer relocation or visa support, right? It's a
Yeah.
lower level role or it's a really high level role or a company might not have budget for relocation or have anything set up. They might not be allowed or able to sponsor visas, right? So they can't offer relocation from an international individual to come over here and work and be under a visa. Um, so the first thing I would do in that scenario is likely look at location. Where are they already? Because I don't want to go through the hiring process and then ask somebody to relocate themselves is like a really crappy situation for everyone involved. Um, so yeah, so that parameter might be something that's really important outside of the skills that are needed. The other part that's not written on a job description, most companies are not like, let me air my dirty laundry or clean laundry and tell you what's going on in the studio. So, you might have the perfect resume, but the approach that you might have had at another company that you share may not be the approach that they need. So again, the skills will qualify, and then you have kind of the behind the scenes issues that are going on, that are happening. And so a lot of times that's where our screen will come in, where we'll kind of look at behavioral situations and look for um, kind of a proven experience that somebody has. And then we'll also look at like what is the potential that this person can grow into, right? Where are they going in their career? So it's not just like the black and white. It's never black and white of like what is on a page and do I match that and give me a chance because I'm missing this one skill.
Hmm.
It is a balance of trying to literally find the right individual that matches all of the qualifying parameters within a whole lot of words. I don't know if I answered that effectively, but that's
Oh,
where I'm at
yeah,
right now.
I think you But you said something that I want to pick at. Now,
Yeah, yeah.
most studios, it sounds like, and I think my experience resonates with this, is that you don't get the direct dirty laundry, but you do get those behavioral questions. How much do interviewees need to be like reading into the questions and think on their feet during an interview to be like, they're asking this about this subject, how much can you extrapolate about how to frame your answer in that moment, or and additionally, how common is it in job descriptions for companies to start really framing the type of person that they're looking for? Because I mean, you could have your generic designer position, but if you need a designer who like that knows how to deal with UX and microtransactions. So like that
Hmm.
comes in skill set, but if you're needing someone to come into the dirty laundry aspect, will some of that be framed in the job description?
Yeah, I actually do believe that, and there's a portion that I'm kind of building out in a couple presentations that I'm doing for a couple post-secondary education places. And I have this theory that both resumes right now and job descriptions are actually risk mitigation documents. So your resume is set to tell me how you're going to help me mitigate risk if we were to hire you, right, in the role.
Yeah.
Job descriptions as well can be great risk mitigation. And I think you can find out a lot about what's happening in a job description. So, like, something that's easy is like, we all know that collaboration is listed, right, on a job description.
Right.
And if it says something like, um, extremely effective communication and collaborating across cross functional teams. Well, number one, it's because they've always had that and they want that to continue, or they really need that because it's not missing or it's not present, it's missing. So these are questions that you can keep in your back pocket as a candidate as well. Is like, hey, what difficulties do you feel like are in cross functional departments, or like, is there anything that you feel like I'd really be able to help with and impact when it comes to cross functional department communication in my first 30, 60, or 90 days, right? As well as
Yeah.
in the interview, if you have panels that are asking you the same questions in each panel, particularly at the end of the interview, they've gotten through the questions a hiring manager has asked them. If all of them ask you how you deal with conflict, red flags should be going off for you, right?
Yeah.
Of like, ooh, there's something here. But that is where you can turn it around. If you're not afraid, or if you feel if you feel capable of what keeps coming up. Like, I'm not afraid of friction or conflict. I actually think that's where we get some of our best design, right? Or we get some of the
Right.
best outcomes can be there if you're in the right mindset to be able to walk into that. But I do think that the words that people use should be measured carefully. And then, sorry, your other question about behavioral interviewing,
How
I
much
can't
are those
recall.
questions? How much are those questions kind of leading the witness to be telling you the
Yeah,
dirty laundry, and how much do you need to think
yeah.
on your feet to start adapting in the middle of the interview?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always about adaptation. However, if you can sometimes also ask for accommodations. Like, if you're an individual that has a harder time kind of thinking on your feet, if you will. And also, like, I'm actually particularly neurodivergent, which I am late diagnosed, like ADHD. And so I like to know what to expect. And so there have been times that I've asked for accommodations of like, can I have an idea of the types of questions that I'll be asked and how deep we'll be going on this call? You can always ask. They can deny it, but you can always ask so that you feel well prepared. The best thing for interviewing too, I think, is learning how to behavioral interview. And there's quite a few different systems out there. I think the most used one, I think, is STAR, right?
Yep.
Situation. I can't think anymore. It's been like a 12-hour day, which is dumb. What is it? Tell me.
Situation,
Situation.
the task
Do you
at
remember?
hand.
Yeah. The action
Yeah.
taken
Yes.
and the
Situation, task
resolution.
taken, and the resolution. Yep.
Action taken. Yeah, there we go. See, we're smart. So you can set yourself up in framing your answer in that way and don't wait for them to ask you the different follow-up questions that will get there, right? They are looking for all of those behaviors and proven capability of what you've done before. So if you're going through and you're like, you look at the job description and you're looking at kind of the action words that are there, and you're like,
Mhm.
what's a good example of how I could prove that I had great cross-functional collaboration during a time of friction and what I did and how I helped resolve it? And then frame it for yourself, right? And if you're constantly thinking about, they're asking me about a situation, what did I do? What actions did I take? What was the resolution? And then the kicker for that is, how is it measurable? Or if there was an error that was made, or a mistake that was made that you took accountability for, how did it change how you chose to work moving forward? Like, if you can show growth and if you can show accountability and responsibility in what you're doing, you're already pre-answering questions and reducing the risk portion of it. We just have to make sure, though, that those things are real, that those things are things you did, not that you saw your team do. And if you did see your team do them and it still came to resolution, that's great. Just make sure that you call that out, as well.
Absolutely. And to back to your point earlier, using AI to rehearse your answers, like
For
there's
sure.
the voice recording, and you can have that conversation doing practice interviews
Hmm.
that I have practiced my star response multiple times to feel comfortable doing it and just retelling it, but then still adapting it to the interview and the company and the job description still takes
Hmm.
repractice and re-rehearsing that. So coming back to that, and even if you don't do the voice recording, you can still get the text and practice,
Hmm.
practice. I can't
Yeah.
emphasize that enough. You have to get comfortable with the words. You can't like ad libbing it. Just
Mm.
doesn't have the same impact. And if we're talking value and impact of your story, it also comes from how you're delivering it and how your words are landing. So practice words and practice that reflection. If you're not comfortable with AI, there is always so many Discord servers out there of people who are willing to do practice interviews or services out
Hmm.
there. If that's the way you want to go, that's the way you're more comfortable getting that one-on-one attention.
Yeah.
People do whatever's
Yeah.
comfortable, but like practicing, there has to be
Yes.
some amount of practicing.
Yeah. I actually was working with somebody once where I was trying to help them learn how to interview, and what I decided in that approach, because I felt like the answers were like protective in a way of like, I don't want somebody to think badly about me, right? And so I'm going to try to just like make everything sound really positive. And so the tactic I used with this person, again, not in an actual interview, in interview training and assessment, was, I want you to be vulnerable with me and tell me the worst thing that you've done at work, like the worst mistake you have ever made at work. I want you to tell me the story about it. And I obviously had built trust with this person, and they shared it with me, and I said, "Okay, we're going to learn how to reframe it, because what did you learn from it? What did you actually learn from that?" And they're like, "Why would I ever talk about a mistake that I made?" And I was like, "Because it's becoming standard on every recruiting screen that I am aware of, is like, tell me about a time you dealt with ambiguity and how did you overcome it? How did you up level your team in the midst of XYZ? Tell me about a mistake you made and how did it change how you worked, right? We're looking for accountability. Can you take responsibility?" And so, again, like, to me, maybe that's a great place for people to start if they don't feel strong at interviewing. If you can get over, like, peeling back the onion layers on where you really vulnerably felt like you made the worst mistake professionally that you have made, and you can understand and be vulnerable and honest with yourself about the responsibility of it and how it has changed how you've worked, you will win in the interview room. Like, you just will. You will win in the interview ring every time. So yeah. So that's that. Um, The other thing I wanted to touch on too is, I don't think that people understand the investment of a studio, or like any workplace across industry, whatever, of how much time and money is involved in interviewing. And so I did want to touch on that a little bit with you. And the reason why is because when you start looking at the fact of, I have a lot of people that will write to me and say, I just need somebody to give me a chance, right? I know I don't completely match, but if someone can just give me a chance, like I can hit it running. And again, with so many people hurting, it is really hard at times to be like, look, it comes down to time, quality, and cost. Like it sucks, but it does. We have to focus on the people that we feel can be successful. Um, and so I did want to break that down a little bit. So again, by the way, the other thing I was going to say for any recruiters listening, if they're still listening at this point, because like there's no universities or schools that teach recruiting. We've literally all pretty much had to learn on the job. And so every recruiter I've ever met is usually type A, has very strong opinions, and will probably disagree with everything I'm saying. And that's okay because we all have different opinions. But when I was going through um, multiple studios that I had worked at, looking at average salary of people that are interviewing, it's like average cost per hour is like 50 to maybe 75 because of the level of people that are generally interviewing tend to be a little more on the senior end for the most part. So like if we look at it, and I think that I was organizing this at like an average of like 50 to 77 an hour. And then like 8 to 10 individuals are usually involved in the interview and the interview process. And there's usually another 5 to 10 that are in coordination, approvals, administrative things like writing an offer letter and all of these pieces, right? Is like the low end cost for like an entry level interview is like $1,200. But when you're in the senior realm, you're talking like $7,700 plus for one interview, right? And that's not even considering like development time because development time isn't factored into interviewing time. So if we interview 10 candidates and that person is attending a pre-sync, an interview panel for an hour or close to an hour, documentation of how they evaluated your interview, attending a debrief, we're talking like a lot of development time that goes against this. And so again, when we look at risk mitigation, this is when we're talking about like it has to be a high quality candidate that we just cannot. Sometimes we can take a risk and a chance and we can roll the dice, but more often than not, companies are looking to mitigate that risk coming in.
I,
Um,
as a producer, I'm constantly looking at team schedules and going, okay, this meeting that's reoccurring with 18 people, do we really need this? Because it's 18 people not doing their discipline work that they're really the only ones qualified to be doing. But then you consider the
mhm,
meeting and you consider it going on weekly and you can look at the history of it. How many times has it actually gone off? How many times was it canceled? And you can calculate the cost of that one singular meeting, and you can break it down: development time, just monetarily, what else are you losing in that exchange? But hiring, and this is my
mhm,
opinion, and I think a lot of others, is that hiring is the most important process for a manager and for a team to be doing. And so when you of course you want to have trust in the person that you're hiring, because not just because of the cost, but because you're going to be training them and they're going to be acclimating for the next 3 to 6 months, which is
mhm,
cost. And if you get someone who isn't joining in on the culture, who isn't living up to the job that they were hired for, or suddenly business needs change, you kind of look at that a little bit differently. Not to disassociate
mhm.
from there's a person there, but
Of
to
course.
go,
Yeah.
we're responsible for the business as well. That's one thing I know a lot of people struggle with, is they join games because they're like, I want to make games, I want to have fun. And a lot of people do get to have that. And there are moments where everyone gets to share in that. But the responsibility and the accountability comes knocking of, can you pay your bills? Can you pay your employees?
Totally.
Are you going to deliver? And it
Mhm.
starts with hiring. And hiring process can get very expensive very quickly, and not just
Absolutely.
with money.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's something that I don't think a lot of people end up flipping the perspective. Like, you're the interviewee or you're the interviewer, but you're not the person responsible for hiring, or you're not the person responsible
Mhm.
for the recruiting process. And understanding that, when we really got to work closely together at our last studio, that
Yes.
was really eye-opening for me. And it's like, we see these problems, and for me as a producer, I'm like,
Yes.
okay, team, let's solve this next time. In the retrospective, we talked, let's address it, and it's one of those things that you don't think about unless you're really close to it.
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised it's one of your main
Yeah, yeah.
perspectives. But we were segueing.
The
What were
next
you
slide I
what
actually
were you
had
jumping into?
was so 10 to 25% of candidates that apply are communicating that they're qualified. We know that about 85% of new hires across any industry, 85% is the success rate of somebody starting at a new job and not failing out, like, which means 15%, 10 to 15% of people, like, let's say 4 months to a year after they're like, first of all, how many times are we hired into a job and a year later are you even doing that job? Like, it's completely different, generally speaking, I feel like, where you're like, it's not the job I was really hired for, but like I found my place, right? Because of the outlier skills you might have, and you up level the company in other ways. But the crazy part is when you start looking at the cost of a failed hire, a lot of times people are like, oh yeah, it's like 30 or 40 grand for a cost of a failed hire. It is not. It is well over $100,000 for a hire to fail out in the first 4 months, because of, it's not just that person's interview, it is every interview that came before in selecting that candidate as well, the development time involved. It is
Oh,
absolutely integral for companies to make smart decisions. You think of that 10 hires, $1 million in terms of the full investment, basically going all in. And that's not talking about benefits administration or like any of the like perks we get as employees. You know, it becomes a numbers game, and it sucks. And I hate saying that because, and you know this about me, I swear I fight really tooth and nail to keep humanity in the recruiting process. That's been my focus since day one, whether it was hiring contractors all the way through full time, whether it was military stuff, or whether it was like really fun, cutesy stuff. It has always been about the human beings behind every process, the interviewing team, the CEO has to make hard decisions. My empathy might be going down a little bit more for them, but the entry level candidates that are just trying to figure out, like, great, I just invested 4 years in college, like, now what do I do in this master's program? These are stories, these are the communicative tissue that makes up the people, the teams, the companies where we spend like the majority of our time. So okay, I kind of went like off there, but yeah, so getting back to, like, it comes down to quality, and it comes down to risk mitigation. And yeah, like, if we're talking 10 interviews,
oh,
we're easily at the $75,000 mark. And that is why, unfortunately, we cannot just take the risk and roll the dice. We have to choose the very best person for the roles that we're looking at. And that starts with a really great screen and a really great interview, and being able to advocate for yourself based on your previous experience. So, most studios agree hiring is the most integral investment that they have. And most studios are mitigating risk through their hiring, whether it's about their product and their IP, whether it is about the culture that they want to protect or improve. Uh, like, it's not just ones and zeros that I think that people think that it is. And everyone internal to every studio that I've ever worked at thinks that they understand recruiting, whether they're a recruiter or not. I really do think recruiting, the pieces people can see, it's like an iceberg. You see like the top 10% or whatever it is. All of the other things are underneath. And it's within the fabric of like all of the strategy when it comes to securing and shipping a product. So, so yeah, that's that.
so now I love that perspective, and I know, like, if we zoom out of just games and we look at tech and we zoom out at larger issues and larger scale impacts of what's going on around, and that hesitancy to invest, that hesitancy to, hey, we're going to grow our studio. I mean, we look at all the studios right now, the hiring is very limited. What some companies that were doing all full time are now doing mostly contracts. Studios reduce their size, and they're not coming back up to those numbers. We're not seeing that shift. And it's not just a matter of product cycles. Some companies will have those flexes, but I think right now, even those flexes are hard capped. It's not necessarily a hiring freeze, but it is a, we're only hiring someone that we really truly need,
Hmm.
and there is a demonstrable need, not just
Yeah.
we're there
Well,
in our cycle. So I think that perspective of looking at the ones and zeros, knows that we have to understand that it comes from an even greater place of uncertainty, not just in our industry, but they're being fed by other industry, and they're again looking at it monetarily as a business, and they're not just hedging their bets, but they're fighting for their own survival because they see how the industry is, how atrophied the money pool is. Yes, these companies are making the most amount of profit ever, but that's still, I think that that's still a delayed input or a delayed output from where we're at. I mean, if we're really looking at the hiring numbers as this is post quarantine, where everything kind of settled and shifted back a little bit more normal, and there was the return to office of those hiring
Mm-hmm.
numbers, they didn't meet the numbers of business that they were expecting, and in getting the slice of the industry. So yeah, those numbers have to cool down, they have to come down. The money is shifting attention. AI was everywhere. It was much louder, I would say, a year ago. Now that's where do we go from here? And it's all a big puzzle that no one's quite figured out. And but the thing is that we're also
Hmm.
uncertain of what's coming next.
Yeah.
That's going to impact all of it. Of course, there's this stabilizing, circle the wagons kind
Mm.
of
Mm-mm.
energy
Yeah,
going on.
you know, I mean, yeah, I can talk about it's my personal opinion, so it's fine. So I'm actually really excited, believe it or not, for the next layer of gaming. Again, I'm a huge gamer. It's why I got into this business. My spouse and I, like, it's our date night almost every night. Like, getting to right now, we're back, playing D4. Like, we're doing a lot in Dark Tide, like 40K, and like we're constantly playing, and I actually think that the reckoning that's happening, I know it's painful, and I myself, like, I was at a job for, it was actually a year to the day, believe it or not. It took me an entire full year, even having recruiting, networking, and knowing a lot of people, and having hired a lot of people, and having those connections. I mean, it was just really wanting. I also didn't take the very first thing. Maybe that's a little privileged, but I really wanted to make sure I was aligned with a company that I was really excited about and have been a big fan of, because it's just how my brain and my heart operate. Is I just have to believe in what I'm hiring for. So I'm excited for the next layer of gaming, and this is why. Is um, I think that creativity is going to go back to smaller teams, and I respect the big giants that are out there. Okay, I
Yeah.
respect them. Um, I understand the decisions. I think, at the level that I can understand where they're at. But the next great games are not going to come, in my opinion, from a giant publisher. The next great games are going to come from tools accessibility for people that are passionate about making awesome experiences. And we get back to the heart that is game development. Because for those that I think are within that realm, of the last 20, 25 years of making games, people that have been let go, the ones that are able to figure out how to pull a scrappy team together, the tools are more accessible, I think, than they've ever been. The technology is more accessible than it's ever been. You don't have to have a graphics engineer. You can find some tools that you can build, right? Sorry, graphics engineers, I don't mean to call you out. Or, like my
Yep.
spouse, like, you don't have to be able to afford XYZ for a specific type of artist or outsource manager or technical artist. Hell, you don't even need a recruiter, really. You can just network. So there are going to be people that are scrappy and pulling it together. We've seen some great games that are very small teams that are like super fun, to play and making good money. That to me is where the responsibility is. I think that a lot of the big publishers that went first party, I just think they understand now how expensive it is to develop a title. And I do think they're probably going to head back more into the publishing realm and release the grip on a lot of the first party development pieces. And so it's kind of like, sometimes you do need a hailstorm, or you do need like a forest fire to rip through, and it is devastating. And yes, it destroys. And yes, it's heartbreaking. But there is going to be some really cool shit coming out of this. Like, reserve your tenacity, reserve what it is that
I
got you
agree.
passionate about the industry to begin with. Those opportunities, I really do believe, are going to come back. We're going to see smaller studios popping up that are reasonably sized, that understand how to make like really, really great games, the ones that we love playing. that are not just based on like another big season pass and another let play my game in perpetuity for every title that comes out, because we have a limited amount of time that we can spend. So anyway, that's kind of my soapbox speech, is like, don't give up, don't give in. There are going to be great games to play again, and there still are with the big guys, as well as smaller studios. But like that heart for game development, like don't give up on it. You know, do what you have to do to help your family survive. When it comes down to it, obviously we have to do that. We have to pay the bills and figure that out. Know how to access resources, which again, like if you want, at the end of this podcast, I actually had gotten a list of resources a couple years ago together. It was specific to Washington state, but I'm happy to do that for any state. Is like, how can I have help with my electric bill? How can I help with deferment of my loans? How can I help with WIC or with food programs? Like, if you are hurting, there are resources that are out there, and like take them, grab onto them if you need them. Of course, we never want to see anybody hurting, but on the career front, like don't give up, keep digging in, and I really do think that we're going to see a flip and a tide turning from where we're at right now.
I agree very much with your perspective, and I appreciate those resources. I would love to have them in the show notes, so we will
Yeah.
get them to everyone who listens one way or another. And of course, sharing your connections and whether it's your LinkedIn, are there any other places that people can connect with you, or is LinkedIn just a good place to reach out?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is a great place right now, and even there, like I answer everyone that I can. I just ask for patience because I do get hit up quite a bit. So I know that I'm even delayed. Like even tonight, I know I'm delayed in answering some folks that I owe answers to. But if I can't answer it, I will try to find somebody who can. And then there's actually some really amazing resources that I know are really well known, and we can drop those as well for those that are job seeking. And I'm sure, you know, I just don't want to say their names in case there's like affiliation, whatever, whoosy
Yeah.
whatsies. But I think it'd be really great to get people involved in. There's a really great Discord community as well as like resourcing that has like tons of job opportunities and sites and everything, interview feedback and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we're in a weird spot.
We
One thing that would be interesting too, if people want to, is like job posting analysis.
yeah.
Um, is really interesting to me right now, of like how companies are kind of looking at mitigating this risk, right? And I was trying to click through a couple of examples that I had saved. Um, I think it was like cross functional communication and strong implementation of gameplay features. And my brain was like, are you able to take ambiguous design and turn it into working systems? Right? Like right off the bat. Or like, do you know how to ship under constraint? Do you know how to ask clarifying questions cross functionally? And yeah, but it's quite interesting like how job descriptions are being written currently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of those feel like word salad or just like buzzwords, but they are trying to get to something very intentional. And
Yeah, I agree.
I think what you're also looking at is we can't always like job descriptions. They get written, they get reviewed, and maybe tailored a bit. I don't know how much of your time when you're going through the hiring process that someone's giving you a job description and you're like, you need to rewrite this and this, and it feels like a C minus English essay in high school. And you're just like, no, you got to redo this. But I feel like some of those job descriptions that get out there are intentionally vague, and it takes having a conversation with someone to start deciphering it and give you an angle so that you feel comfortable in that interview. Was that something
Yeah.
that you've experienced?
Yeah, I mean, I think that every recruiter I know works pretty closely with a hiring manager and will advise or consult depending on the relationship and the trust that's there, right? Of what's going on. You know, the other thing too, another good tip when you're job hunting, if you're not too sure about what's been happening in a company in the last, like, I would say relevancy is like 5 years. You know, anything before that, I can kind of explain away. The last 3 years for sure, the last year definitely. Look online. You can find news from every company that's out there trying to like either pitch or You'll see news, you might see a bit of drama, you can see like Metacritic, what did they ship last? How did it ship? Were there any issues in the ship that happened? And so then, like, if you see that a product had difficulty shipping because the technical design and enemy AI was off, you've got people complaining on Reddit about how terrible the enemy encounters were, or something like that. If you're a designer and you came from that studio, by the way, I'm probably going to ask you some pretty pointed questions about it. And it's because I want to understand, like, did you try to make impact? Even if it shipped, not what you wanted it to. I'm really curious about the story behind it. What impact did you have? Did you notice it beforehand? Can you talk about it? Can you not? That's okay. But you can do the reverse for companies, right? You want to join a company, you know that their last ship was difficult. Um, you can speak to that, right? You can speak to like how much you enjoyed it as a player, that it was a really difficult shipping moment, but that you'd be really excited to bring your experience to the team, and that even if they've already solved it, that that's something that you're really interested in, or something like that. So again, it's having I think that the intention right now, or maybe the reflex, is when people are job hunting, I know that it's a panic. I know it is a crisis. I know that people need work. But if you spray and pray your resume and you're not tailoring it, and you're not telling me specifically how it adapts to the role, you're not going to get seen.
Hmm.
So it's either
When you
take the
say
time, even
specifically
if you
adapts
use
to the
AI.
role, are
Hmm.
you speaking
Yeah.
primarily towards the job description and making sure that you have the things that are called out, or are you saying
Yes.
going, like, obviously I think going that step further and having examples of those things proves a point, but then also being able to apply it to that company, finding a story, finding what it look like to you, as opposed to just hitting the words and the phrases that are on the job description. What does it look like to tailor to that company and being able to
Yeah.
speak to them? Because I know I had one interview panel where I was talking to a company that was a huge fan of their game, and they're like, "Whoa, tell us why you're a huge fan of the game." And I did what you're saying. I used one of their Reddit stories that was being tracked as a hot fix, and while it was happening, I was able to reverse engineer how I would have happened, how I saw it getting uh, to that point, and then how I would have been playing the fix of it. So to be able to walk through my process and break down my understanding of their team from the outside, told that I had that critical eye and that understanding of a role, even if I didn't know how their team was constructed, I knew how to break it down, and I could have that connectivity in mind and then how to resolve it at the same time.
Hmm.
I hard to do that in a resume, but is that something that that's something that you can actually obtain to a reasonable level by tailoring your resume?
Yeah, so I do think you can do that in a resume, and I'll bring up a few points that I kind of want to touch on. So let's kind of start at the top. So and as well, I want to kind of bring AI into this, because there is this kind of fad right now, and I do understand it. People will throw their resume into AI, throw in the job description, and say rewrite my resume using the job description. If your resume has exactly the word, like the phrases from the job description, of course we're going to see that you qualify, but like it does look disingenuous. And so I do think, like, again, it's like you can still use AI for it, but you need to tell me how you did the line that's in the job description. That will hit harder, instead of telling me what it is. Most job descriptions, the qualifications are things, right? It's not the how, generally speaking. So just one tip: if you're using AI, take a moment to not just have the phrases from the job description, but you actually want to quantify how you did the thing that it's actually talking about. The next part of kind of what you were talking about, I have had people that come into an interview with the intention of proving to me that they know, the hard things that happened on our shipped title, and that regardless of question, they want their story told. So I think it's great to have the research on the company, to have answers for questions, to be able to loop that in, but just make sure that you don't go into an interview with your own agenda. Let the recruiter or the interviewer lead. And then if you're like at the end, if they're like, do you have any questions? Or like, if it does come up naturally, be like, I was actually thinking about this feature that I know shipped, and it sounded like it was a pretty hard ship. And I was thinking like how my previous experience, if I came across that, like how I would handle it. And that's a great way to kind of not sound like you're pointing fingers at the company. Like, well, if I was here, I would have done this. And you have no idea if the person in front of you had anything to do with the problem that shipped. Not going to be a great relationship if you're calling your interviewer out of like, I can do better than you, right? Just not saying that you're doing that, but I think it does need to come up naturally.
Yeah.
Now, could you bring it up respectfully in a cover letter? I'd love to hear that story. I used to hate cover letters before, and now I really love them because I think it gives me a lot of context at times behind the resume. And that's usually where I see the story show up, because people are right now kind of blasting using AI, shoving as many resumes out there, and then they'll do a tailored cover letter. And the cover letter tells me more about the how right now than the resume. And I'd really love that to flip. So yeah. So if you tailor your resume to the job or to the company, just making sure that you have in your analysis of the bullet point is, what did you do that you can speak to the bullet point? Don't regurgitate the bullet point to me because I know what you do for a living generally. Tell me how. Tell me what impacted, tell me how it was difficult and that you overcame something. As a bullet point on your resume, that's actually going to resonate. And the applicant tracking systems are smart enough, like they will kind of pick up those pieces because the right keywords or the right kind of intentional speech or whatever it is that it's weighing and measuring, it will do that. Again, it's not filtering up or filtering down. It's just like, hey, here's a candidate that seems applicable, is basically what happens. So yeah. And then it's my job to look at it. Again, I know that most people don't understand this. We take 10 to 15 seconds on a resume. Our scan, by the way, I'm also a pattern reader, so it might be a little shorter, a little longer than that. Generally speaking, though, I'd say it's like 10 to 30 seconds on a first pass. And really, I'm looking for a heat map. I'm looking for a hit list of the things that I know that the company cares about, the team cares about, that the job needs, that there's risk, and like, what do we need to mitigate? All of that is being processed by a flawed human looking through a resume and going, is there enough here for me to dig deeper? Then I will deep dive into a portfolio, into design documentation, not into code because I can't look at code and make heads or tails of it. But again, that's where the resume comes in, and just like that conversation that happens. And it's why interviewing and that is so important. I We should probably touch on assessments too. If you can, always be willing to do assessments. Yeah, we're gonna need to. Because um oh man, there's like so much that goes into everything.
There is. I
I
mean,
would say,
know that there's so many artists who are like, I can only do one of these every so often, but they make them all work because they know what each
yeah,
opportunity looks like, and they will make it work, but they will also be heavily scrutinizing how those assessments go because they
yeah,
also easily be taken advantage.
yeah. Well, and I think there's balance there, right? Everybody has to decide for themselves what they're willing and capable or able to do. In the age of AI, I think that part of the reason for assessments, like, there's kind of a double-edged sword. I see them going away as a result of AI because, like, if I asked you for a game design document, are you not just going to probably put it in AI and then like put it in your voice and it spits back and it sounds great? Here's the kicker, though, for an assessment. If you are going to do that, I really hope you can speak to it because you will be asked about it in an interview. And if you can't back up your findings, they're going to make some assumptions, or it just it'll fall flat. And so again, it's like using AI if you are as a yes and or a plus one is great. But you should be able to speak about your findings on the back end depending on the type. And if you're working with a recruiter, try to have patience. You can also hold them accountable though. If it's 24 to 48 hours, if they've said, reach out to me on Tuesday if you haven't heard from me, reach out to them on Tuesday because you haven't heard from them, and just be kind about it. But like, kindness goes a long way. Try to have patience. There is so much going on in the recruiting realm right now. All of us are kind of a little overtasked and a little undersupported. And, you know, just understand that like we're still thinking about candidates like when we're sitting down at the table for dinner. You know, I'm still thinking about the conversations I had throughout the day in a very human sense. And um yeah, so I would love to come back and talk more with you.
Absolutely. So let's we'll put a pin on that. We'll schedule that out. We'll
Such
work
a
out with your
producer.
schedule. Make sure that we can advertise ahead.
Yeah, put a pin in that.
I know, right? I will. I'm this close to getting my kids on sprints, and it'll be fantastic. Well, thank you so much for the conversation,
Yeah, yeah.
Christine, and I look forward to having you back on another episode. We'll dive into assessments even more and
Yes.
other hot topics of recruiting.
Yeah.
So anyone who listens to the episode, get your questions ready or join the Discord and start the conversation. Start sending me your questions, and we'll have those ready for next time. So the episode may be stopping here. The conversation continues on Discord. Find the link in the description. Thanks again, Christine. Connect with Christine on LinkedIn. Her link will be in the description as well. So we'll see you all next time on the Summoning Hour.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, everybody. That was Christeen Mackey. You can find her on LinkedIn through the link in the podcast description. Part of the game industry hiring process still feels opaque? Bring us the question you wish you could ask a recruiter without worrying that it might hurt your candidacy. Join the Summoning Hour Discord and add it to the conversation. Your questions can help shape a future episode, written follow-up, or community discussion. Also, be on the lookout on social media for the announcement when Christine comes back to share more about recruiting tips, tricks, and perspectives. In the meantime, choose another episode from the playlist and subscribe for more thoughtful discussions about games, the work behind them, and the people who make them. The episode ends here, but the conversation keeps going.